Let's move on and bring in Rod Snyder. He was voted tallest Democrat in the state after Jay Rockefeller retired from politics.
Tallest Democrat and whitest teeth, too.
Well, that's both. Well, if you're going to perform and sing, you better have the look.
Tallest and best teeth.
Let's say good morning to the vice chair of the Democratic Party in the state of West Virginia, Rod Snyder. Good morning, Rodster.
Good morning. Senator Rockefeller and I are the exact same height, so I'm not even giving him that.
Oh my! Won't
my.
even. What are you about 6'6", Rod?
Yeah, 6'6", and I think he is as well.
Can you dunk?
I played basketball in high school at Faith Christian Academy, and that's been many years ago. I couldn't dunk then, and I definitely cannot now.
That's where I voted on Election Day. It was in that gym at Faith Christian Academy.
Absolutely, it's a polling place.
Yeah, and I voted there, and I was looking at all the pictures lining the walls of the former basketball teams. I didn't see one of you up there.
Well, I went there so long ago that we didn't even have that gym at that point. So that's a luxury.
Okay. Who was your coach, Rod?
Oh, gosh. Let's see. George Nunn.
George Nunn, that's what I thought.
A coach named Nunn at Faith Christian Academy. I like that.
It does make sense.
Yeah. Of course.
George came in last year around this time when we were doing a big thing with the Boys and Girls Clubs.
Oh, great! Yeah, he's always been extremely committed to the community.
Yeah,
Rod, we read the press release that the Democratic Party sent out on Jason Barrett's switch. You were rather critical. Your thoughts since then, have they changed at all?
Here are the thoughts, by the way. I'll read them as they appear in the press release. Delegate Jason Barrett has prioritized his own political ambitions over the interests and the will of the voters of the 61st District, said Rod Snyder, Vice Chair of the West Virginia Democratic Party. Delegate Barrett was dishonest with his own constituents about the agenda he intends to support in Charleston. Pretty strong words.
Yeah, my opinion certainly hasn't changed since then. And if Delegate Barrett thought that he wasn't going to face any backlash for this, then he was just being naive. I think he knew that folks were going to be pretty upset. And, I feel probably worse for the local volunteers and activists and Democratic Party leaders who had just, spent the past year out campaigning for him and donating money, doing what they could to support his reelection, only to have, 5 weeks later from to switch parties. We've seen this before. I hate this timing where, basically running in one party, getting everybody to help you, and then quickly switching as soon as the election's over. I think it just, it does feel like betrayal to folks on the ground that I think have been there for Jason over the years. So, yeah, it's really unfortunate. And, whether or not it speaks to his character or his, truthfulness or what have you, only Jason can answer that in terms of his motives. But I know folks are really hurt and disappointed and upset, and rightfully so.
You called it self-serving opportunism, Rod.
I think that's exactly right. Part of it is, and I listened to the interview that you all did with him earlier this week, and and some of you hit the nail on the head. If he's looking ahead to his own political career, it's a headwind if you're a Democrat right now, and obviously there's a lot more opportunities for Republicans. So if he wants to run for a higher office, I suspect that he sees this as an easier path. We also know that we think there's some sour grapes over the House caucus race that transpired last week down in Charleston. He backed the horse that didn't win, and so when Doug Scaff was elected minority leader, now Delegate Barrett also said that they were going to take his finance committee appointment away. I have not heard that, and I talked directly to Doug Scaff, and he certainly didn't say that. So part of it I just think is a bit of sour grapes. And then the other issue that you all have been talking about extensively this week, which I think needs more attention, is this situation with the Berkeley County Council and hiring of Omega, Delegate Barrett's wife's new lobbying firm, to the tune of $16,000 a month. That was announced on December 8th, 3 days before Delegate Barrett announced his party switch. If I'm a taxpayer in Berkeley County, I want to know a lot more about what transpired there. Were there other bids? How did the county council come to its decision around this? The head of Omega is former Senator Daniel Hall, who was the original party switcher several years ago that flipped the Senate from Democrat to Republican.
Indeed.
He's been whining and dining, Delegate Barrett and Summer for the last year. If you look at the lobbying reports, they've spent a lot of time together. I don't have any other information other than that, except for if I'm a Berkeley County taxpayer, I want to know what happened with that situation. It's a lot of money. And the last thing I'll say is, if you're in Berkeley County, you have the best, or at least most senior representation in the state. You have the Senate president, you have the Senate Judiciary Chair, the Senate Education Chair, and the House Finance Chair. Why do you need a lobbyist to the tune of $250,000 when you have the most senior leadership in the state? I think it's a fleecing of the Berkeley County taxpayers, and it needs to be looked into further.
So the answer to that question from Summer Barrett and from Elaine Mock yesterday, Rod, was more or less that we do have a lot of clout. We do have a lot of very good legislators in Berkeley County. However, the job of influencing the entire legislature is a job in which you need a professional governmental affairs person to do that, and you need that person to be doing it 12 months a year and not just 2 months a year. Your thoughts on that?
There's not another county in the state of West Virginia that currently retains a lobbyist. Berkeley County is alone in this. And if you have the Senate president and all these other key committee chairs, I suspect that this should not be that difficult of a job in terms of getting the ear of the key leaders in the House and Senate. So no, I don't buy it. I think it's a really poor use of taxpayer dollars, and just in terms of perceptions and the conflicts of interest that exist, or at least the money flowing back to the wife of a current lawmaker who just switched parties. I think that folks need to look at what happened there. It doesn't smell right. And I think it needs additional focus and attention. And I'm just saying, I'm a Jefferson County resident. These aren't my tax dollars, but I would be pretty torqued if I lived up there.
Rod, you're throwing a lot of gasoline around, but there's no match to light the fire yet. Take it.
There's a lot of smoke.
Take it all the way through. What I'm saying is, take it all the way through. What are you really trying to say?
All I'm saying is that if a county council makes a decision to spend $250,000 on lobbying, I would want to know how that decision was made. Were there other bids? Were there other firms that were interested? I mean, I think the public should look into that. I think that's a fair question. I'm not accusing anything specifically. I'm saying I think it deserves additional attention.
You make 2 points that I hadn't really thought of, and I appreciate you bringing them up. One is that there probably is not a county in West Virginia with more clout than Berkeley County at the present time in terms of leadership positions.
That's right.
And that's something new, right, for Berkeley County. We've had some stars in the past, Sandra Luck and some others in years gone by, but it's been a long time since we've had that much clout. And I was not aware that of the 55 counties, Berkeley County will now be the only one with a paid lobbyist. I was not aware of that. I should have asked that, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I checked with some folks yesterday. That's what I'm being told. Now, of course, the counties have an association of their own, writ large, in which they represent county interests in Charleston. But in terms of a single county hiring a paid lobbyist, if Berkeley County is the only one, someone should ask why it's needed, versus every other county in the state. And I think it's a fair question. Just at least in terms of taxpayer resources, I think that's why you elect legislators to go down there and represent you. And Berkeley County has some very powerful ones already.
I was speaking with Daniel Bennett yesterday. He was the Democratic candidate who lost to John Hardy in the 63rd district. And we were talking about this topic off the air. It was a phone conversation in the afternoon. And one of the things that he brought up that he was not happy about is that one of the tasks of the new lobbying firm, Omega, and their person, Summer Barrett, is to seek a 1% sales tax for Berkeley County, which I assume he meant they're trying to lobby for home rule. Is that a good idea to be pushing for the home rule? Is that something that you would think is a good idea, Rod?
Well, the Eastern Panhandle, I think, has always felt that having more localized control over decision making is generally a helpful thing. Now, I can't speak to a 1% sales tax. I've not focused on that issue. I'm also guessing the makeup of the Berkeley County voters, they're not typically in favor of tax increases. That's just my gut instinct. But the other thing to know about Omega, I mean, historically, and I didn't even know that they took on for hire, that they were doing for hire work. They were traditionally a trade association for the oil and gas industry for the retailers, so gas stations and whatnot. This is really an interesting thing. Several years ago, when my father was in the Senate, he was working to figure out why the gas prices were so much higher in the Eastern Panhandle versus if you drive over the state line into Virginia, you get lower, the gas prices are lower. Everybody knows you drive down to Winchester or what have you, and you can pay less. There are aspects of state law that have enabled that situation, and my dad was trying to actually fix some of that in the code that would have actually helped provide some relief in fuel taxes. The lobbying firm or the trade association that fought against that was Omega. So at times, this actual firm, I think, has been at odds with the voters and constituents of the Eastern Panhandle on issues. So it's a very odd setup that the oil and gas retailers, gas stations, now represent Berkeley County. I think it's a bit strange.
We have gotten texts and also Facebook entries from Summer Barrett and Jason Barrett, too, saying that Wood Harrison and Monongalia counties all have lobbyists. Rod?
My understanding is that Monongalia does not any longer, but happy to look into that. It's highly unusual, and $250,000. I think the taxpayers should ask questions.
Rod, what is you mentioned that it seems it doesn't smell right. So what is the benefit to the county to hire Summer Barrett, married to Delegate Jason Barrett, who recently switched parties? How does the county, the county was going to hire somebody anyway, so what's the problem with the fact that it was Summer Barrett?
All I'm suggesting is that in terms of the decision making around this, if I were a taxpayer, I would want to know how the county council came to decide this. If you have direct relatives or spouses of lawmakers being hired for these purposes, people will ask questions. And all I'm saying is, if you're a taxpayer or a voter in Berkeley County, I'd want to know the justification behind this. Were there other options? That's all I'm saying. And I think it's a fair question. If we can't have accountability or raise these kinds of things, then then shame on us.
No, it's a fair question. That's fine, but I think you're trying to play both sides of this, Rod, because a little bit earlier in the conversation you made a specific point of saying that the funds would be flowing to the wife of a delegate, in the sense that Jason Barrett there. So you're trying to tie something in there, and I want to know, are you just kind of throwing stuff out to see what sticks against the wall, or is there some type of ethical breach that you're implying is going on here in regards to the employment of Summer Barrett, who's married to a Delegate Jason Barrett?
Obviously, Summer can't, at least in my understanding, according to ethics laws, cannot lobby her own spouse, and I'm sure that they will be very careful about that. That's typically my understanding about the way that works. But in terms of the other power structure in Charleston, the Republican majority, who's making decisions about resources and all of this, by having Jason on the majority side around these types of decisions, it clearly is an easier hill to climb. And so I'm not suggesting anything specifically. All I'm saying is that these questions should be asked around how the decision was arrived at, and were they the cheapest firm? Were they the most connected? What is the reason for this? I think it's a fair question, and I think the folks should answer it at the council.
Very good. Any other questions on this specifically?
No, I'm good.
Dave?
I appreciate you bringing your point of view on today, Rod, and a lot of controversy about this. Doesn't appear that it's going away soon, but we'll see.
And Rod, in regards to the state of the West Virginia Democratic Party at this point, and in the Eastern Panhandle specifically, it's a party that looks like it's on the ropes, Rod.
So let's talk about that for a moment. I joined as vice chair this summer in July, and knew that we were in a really difficult spot. And if you look at the state of the Democratic Party nationally, in rural areas with demographics similar to West Virginia, we have had a very tough stretch. And in fact, the November elections across the country were difficult. Donald Trump had the longest coattails for a losing candidate that I think any of us have ever seen. And some of that was unexpected. Of course, we knew he was going to perform well in West Virginia, but the margins were equal to 2016, and in some places were greater. So there's a couple things. One is, what happens when Donald Trump is gone? I mean, he's a bit of a unique figure in our political history, and I think it's safe to say that the dynamics around his politics will probably not be replicated in just the same way. So I hope that we will have at least structurally some easier elections coming up when he's not on the ballot. But beyond that, there's a ton of party building that needs to happen immediately to get ready for 2022 and 2024. And it's just nuts and bolts fundamentals of making sure that we have 55 strong county executive committees, that our state committee is functioning, that we've got candidate recruitment and training, fundraising, all of just the nuts and bolts. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are some really strong state parties that are operating in tough territories and red states around the country that still have really robust programs. So I think my goal, now that we have the immediate urgency of the November election behind us, is to begin borrowing from and looking to other state parties that I think have some of the best apparatus in the country and really try to institute that here. And it really starts at a local level. You have to have really strong county parties in place that are helping with candidate recruitment and support. And I think the state party needs to focus even more on that, I think, moving forward.
How great of a challenge is it? And you brought this up about rural counties, and I love your line, by the way, the longest coattails of a losing candidate ever. I have my own theory on that. But how big is that challenge where you want to rebuild the Democratic Party in West Virginia to, in a population that's being so influenced by the leftward-leaning national party that they see? See, that to me is a huge mountain to climb for you guys.
Well, yeah, look, I mean, the polarization is happening in both directions. I mean, you've got, Delegate Barrett joining the Republican Party at a time when I think it's probably as far right as it has ever been, just as an example, right? So, like, this is a time in which the edges are pulling in both directions. I do think that typically Democrats in West Virginia have been more moderate, and I think we're fundamentally a big tent party. I think there's room for everybody, and in fact, if we have ideological purity tests in West Virginia, in the West Virginia Democratic Party, we're gonna lose. We need all those folks, I think, to build a winning coalition, and so that's part of the message: is everybody is welcome here, and we are going to we're going to focus on bread and butter, kitchen table issues. Folks in West Virginia are still struggling. The economy has not gotten better under Donald Trump. In fact, in many ways, in some of the sectors that he said he was going to go save, it's gotten worse. There are still major gaps in terms of health access and affordability in rural areas. I mean, we have got to get back to those issues that people are really affected by and make sure that the candidates are all speaking with one voice and pointing out how the current Republican majorities are actually failing us on those issues. So, that's around messaging, it's around branding, and just making sure that we invite everybody into that conversation.
I wish you the very best in doing that and rebuilding the party. And here's why. Not that I'm, a Democrat. Of course I'm not. But I do think that the best governments are those when you have a robust and healthy two-party system. I don't think that one-party systems generally serve a state or a nation very well. My thought.
Agreed. We have to have a healthy two-party system. And, I got into a little squabble on Facebook this past week about this very point. And I think at the moment, at least the sort of the last gasps of Trumpism have a little strain of sort of authoritarianism or autocratic, refusing to concede a duly held election. That scares me. And I'm not talking about at the state level. I'm talking about uniquely with Trump and the dynamics of the last 39, 40 days, however it's long been since November 3rd. We have not seen this scenario in our lifetimes of a president refusing to concede or to suggest that somehow the election was fraudulent. It's very dangerous. And I actually think in terms of the health of a two-party system, at least at a national level, this is really damaging, I think, to the Republicans. And folks are going to, within the Republican Party, going to have to figure out how to bring some rationality back. Otherwise, I mean, we're not talking about differences on issues. We're talking about whether or not our democracy and our elections are accepted as credible. And we talked about this on your show several months ago about, when Trump said he, may not commit to a peaceful transfer of power. Well, obviously it's not, we haven't had at least not much violence in the streets, maybe a little, but it's still just this sort of erosion of credibility of our system that really, really worries me.
Rod, we are out of time. I thank you for yours, and it was great to talk with you when you weren't barricaded in a MARC train cabin.
I haven't been on a MARC train in a few months, but it's great to talk to you all as well, and thanks for having me on.
All the best to you, Rod. Thank you.
Thanks.
Rod Snyder, Vice Chair of the state's Democratic Party at